I changed my name. Josh is our fabulous new director of marketing and all things important to make sure that things like today run well. So Josh, do you want to take a second just to introduce yourself to this illustrious group of people? No pressure. We've got board members, we've got past presidents, we've got very important people on the call.
Hey everybody, Josh Goodman here. Been doing marketing for 17 years now, but very excited to come on and run marketing here at CBI. The main thing I want everyone to know is I'm going to try and get everything running smoothly, and you should be getting some more consistent and meaningful communications from the temple, and also help to facilitate some of this tech stuff and make sure everything runs as well as it can. If you have any questions, anything I can do to help, I'm always here to ask. And I'll probably also be doing some social media training for the whole congregation. If people want to get on and learn some tech stuff and some marketing stuff, I'll take some time once I settle in to do some of my own lunch and learns.
Awesome.
Welcome. Welcome
Thank you.
to the congregation.
And for everyone else, oh, I put Rabbi under my name. Look at that. That's so funny. Rabbi. I'm just.
Well, you are the Rabbi.
Well, I'm changed it to my actual name.
Okay.
So great to see everyone. I have not been with us for Lunch and Learn since I think October, maybe early November. Sarah did November, Seth did December, and I'm in charge of January. And so we begin conversations with
Very
me,
good.
Rabbi Kahn. Thank you very much. And what I thought we would do is we would highlight either members of the congregation or people I know and have more of an interactive dialogue with them just for this month of January, rather than me presenting a text or a current event or having an open conversation about the topics of the day. Not much going on in the country right now. I thought, what better way to use our time together than to learn from our fellow members. And so Gabriel Sandler is also a great former San Franciscan, and that's why he's up first. Although he wasn't born in San Francisco, he is a great San Francisco, and he went to the wrong synagogue. He went to Temple Emmanuel, but nonetheless, the better synagogue. But nonetheless, if you guys remember, I came from Shereth Israel in San Francisco. Both Emmanuel and Shereth Israel actually founded in 1849. And then they split, like most synagogues do, within the first 10 years. The Yekas couldn't stand the Eastern Europeans, and the Eastern Europeans argued with the Yekas over the Shochet, and so they split to two synagogues. So he grew up in San Francisco, and then for high school moved again to Oregon. Over being conspicuously inconspicuous are his parents, Jill and Alan Sandler, who have been members here now for, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years, something like that, something in that, 7 years, even closer, 7 years, it's their sabbatical year. And Jill and Alan are wonderful, wonderful people, and it's been great knowing them as well. Gabriel, if some of you may remember, and I was preparing for my drosh for this Friday night, believe it or not, on a Tuesday, Wednesday, preparing, which is not a word in my vocabulary. And I was looking at the sermon that I did the week before the inauguration in 2016. And there was a congregation, and we had a group participation part. And looking at the room with the congregation and us interacting, and people giving answers to questions that I was asking about what they learned from the election made me so sad. And I miss us all being together very, very much. And I don't like not seeing you, but I was trying to think, what did I say right before, right after the inauguration last time? And I'm gonna talk about it a little bit this Friday night, but just seeing the room filled, our YouTube videos go back 4 or 5 years. It really gave me a moment of sadness. But you may remember a few years ago, it would have been around 2018, in the August-September timeframe, Gabriel was about to leave for his 2-year stint in the Peace Corps. And we did a Tefillat HaDerech, or a blessing from the Bima. And that's, in order for us not to feel so sad all the time, I thought, let's have a little inspiring story, even from a guy who went to the Peace Corps and then had his entire Peace Corps service interrupted by coronavirus. He has done so much since he got back from and Gabriel will talk about this, the entire world's Peace Corps program was basically terminated in March, I believe. Mm-hmm. And everyone from everywhere from the US, everyone throughout the world had to come home. And Gabriel came home, and he did the right thing. He quarantined himself for a couple of weeks, and then he got right back to work on the stuff he was working on. So you don't need to listen to me much more. We're going to listen to Gabriel. He's going to present to you about his experiences, and you probably read the write-up, which is why you're here, in the Peace Corps. Let's give him about 20 minutes to just go through his slides and his information with us, and then when he wraps it up, you can write in the chat. You can write a question. I'll draw on that if something comes up that you don't want to forget, or wait until he's done, and then we'll do what we always do, which is we'll unmute and talk over each other. All right, Josh, thanks again. Thanks for those of you who came on a little bit late. Josh Goodman is our new director of marketing. He's awesome. And Gabriel, I'm turning it over to you. The reins are yours. We're also on Facebook Live if you have friends who don't have Zoom and want to watch this, and then it will be posted on YouTube sometime in the next 24 hours as part of our YouTube Lunch and Learn series archive. And then I'll give you some information about next week at the end. All right, Gabriel, it's all you.
Well, thank you for the very generous introduction, very flattering introduction. Can everyone do me a favor and just wave at the camera if you can hear me okay? All right, hello everybody. I want to just thank you all first off for sharing your time with me today. I really appreciate it. You're in lunch, I'm in mid-afternoon here in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, the most peaceful city in the nation right now. And yeah, I'm just going to jump right into the presentation and share my screen with you.
I was going to say that Madagascar, I know that your parents were a little concerned about Madagascar, and now you're making them concerned about living in DC. So way to go, dude.
Yeah, I seem to choose controversial places. So let me just describe what I'm going to talk about today. So this presentation will be both about my life in the Peace Corps and my life in the immediate aftermath of it and some of the work I've tried to do. Just for your edification, what I'll be talking about today, start about my time in the Peace Corps, some of my experiences in Madagascar, and some elements of Judaism that I found emerged during my service. And then, in the wake of the COVID evacuation, where all 7,000 Peace Corps volunteers were brought home in the course of a week or two, I was able to continue collaborating with some of my counterparts back in Madagascar. So I'd like to talk about that work a little bit, how people have been able to contribute to it, and then answer any and all questions you might have. I don't get to talk about Peace Corps enough, so I relish the opportunity. So just for some quick context, because not everybody knows much about Madagascar, some people's only reference is the cartoon. Madagascar is a large island off the southeast coast of the African continent. Madagascar is diverse and massive. Within Madagascar, about a dozen dialects are spoken, with tons of variety in between the regions, and even with variety town to town. Madagascar comprises 26 million people spread across 5 distinct geographic regions. It's a complicated country. There's a lot of challenges with poverty, infrastructure, education, health, but the people in Madagascar are resourceful, and there are many people finding creative, sustainable solutions to the challenges that they face. I want to right off the bat say yes, in Madagascar I saw lemurs. I saw many lemurs. I saw lemurs that dance. I saw lemurs that are the size of a mouse. There's a picture of a lemur I took on the left. There's a mouse lemur there on the bottom. There's my mother taking a photo of a lemur, me taking a photo of my mother taking a photo of a lemur. There's other wildlife too. There's beautiful chameleons, beautiful fish. And there on the far right is my Peace Corps cat, Coco, who was a wonderful companion to me during service. And she and I went through a lot together. I helped her deliver kittens. She killed my rodents. was a really wonderful friendship that she and I have, and she's safe with a friend in Madagascar, as are her beautiful children. So I moved to Madagascar in September 2018, knowing nothing about Madagascar, which is actually one of the reasons I chose to go. Peace Corps service starts with a 3-month training. During training, you live with a host family there on the left. You study initially a kind of general Malagasy, and then very quickly are assigned your dialect. I studied the Antanusi dialect, which is featured in the south of Madagascar, where I'm pointing to right there, 2 years ago now. So in addition to learning language, you, in my service, learn how to be a English as a foreign language teacher so that I could teach English to the students there. You also go over basic medical care, cross-cultural communication, project planning. All of this training, led by exceptional Malagasy and American trainers and staff, were aimed at preparing my cohort to be scattered across the island, placed into communities, and to do our very best to be helpful with humility, curiosity, and enthusiasm. And besides the challenges, it also turned out to be a whole lot of fun. In that picture there, where I'm pointing at the bottom of the map, all of those little tags are other Peace Corps volunteers in the country. So as you can see, I was pretty far away from most of the other volunteers. After that 3 months, I had another 15 months before the COVID evacuation. So what did I do? How did I fill my time? For one, I was an English teacher. That was my primary assignment. I taught English to classrooms, each of which had about 70 students. So, while I prepared to speak to you all today, there's nothing as intimidating as trying to teach 70 students a language that they don't speak in a language that you're only just learning how to speak. But we found a way. One of the joys of Peace Corps is that in addition to your primary assignment, you can take on other projects, and really whatever work you can find becomes your job. So I co-hosted an educational radio show where we did English lessons, and then eventually combined English lessons with health lessons, including providing information about COVID when the pandemic was first emerging. I was able to co-tutor English for a women's entrepreneurship group. I held classes at a local NGO or a charitable organization. I helped lead a spelling bee, which was a lot of fun. I got to work with several trilingual students who spoke English, French, and Malagasy to translate a museum exhibit that was only in French about Malagasy history into Malagasy and English so that cultural history could be shared with a much broader audience. On my days off, I'd go to the beach, I'd eat oysters, I'd jump in the water with friends, have a few beers by the sunset. I made chocolate by hand. I got a pretty varied and fun life. The work of a Peace Corps volunteer is to join the community and support and learn from the people who invite you to contribute. But the joy of a Peace Corps service is making that community a home and finding a family among so many new friends very far away from your own. It was 18 months of very hard work, a lot of struggle, a lot of laughter, different hairstyles, as you can see in the pictures there, many friendships, and again, just the most stellar sunsets by the ocean.
You did the COVID beard before it was a thing.
I did the COVID beard before it was a thing. I did the long hair because I think we can all relate that finding a new barber is one of our least favorite things. Much to my parents' pleasure, I did shave eventually in service. There's a quote I like by the author George Saunders in his book, Civil War, Land and by Decline. And this is how I think about my town, Fort Dauphin, where I lived while I was in Peace Corps. In the plain blue day is my city, the city where I lived, the city that, in my own fashion, I loved. And I think that really captures the struggle and joy and excitement of the time that I spent there. Now, when I moved to Madagascar, I had an inkling that I was not moving to a country with a substantial Jewish population. And it occurred to me that that might be a good time to explore Judaism for myself. So I brought an Old Testament with me, said I would read the weekly portion, spent a year not doing that. And then in my second year, I was like, okay, let's get to work and keep up. And while that was disrupted by the evacuation, there were some elements of the Old Testament that I found really resonated while I was away. And the rabbi can tell me if my interpretations are totally off, but at the time, these stood out to me. One of the first quotes that stood out to me. So said the God Hashem, who creates the heavens and stretches them forth, spreads out the earth and what grows from it, gives a soul to the people upon it, and a spirit to those who walk on it. And at my time in service, when I read this, to me, it seemed as though we're all given some kind of light, some kind of soul. And that elevated spirit comes in when we go out into the world, explore it, and contribute to it. Now, for me, in this case, it meant going to a different hemisphere and speaking a different language, but I think there's a real value any way we can go out into any community, whether that be in Scottsdale, whether that be in Madagascar, whether it be in a new town. I think there's a real Jewish value in going out and venturing. The whole earth was of one language and of common purpose. Now, this one might be a little ironic because for a lot of my service, I wasn't speaking one language. I was learning a whole new one. And there was a substantial amount of time where I was frustrated by how little I could communicate. I couldn't express my feelings. You could make a joke, self-deprecating jokes are really easy in another language, but it was hard to communicate. But there was, in that initial service, so many instances where just through mutuality and through connection, I was able to build a family, whether it was my host mother's love for her newborn baby or my neighbors in Fort Dauphin inviting me over after I first moved in. You know, we found ways to communicate, and the communication was of the purpose of building community. And I remember one dinner I went to where we were speaking English, French, Malagasy, German, and I think no two people at the table could understand each other, but in the animated nature of that dinner, I think we got a lot across. And that's why this quote stood out to me. And a final one that meant a lot. Hashem said to Abraham, go for yourself from your land, from your relatives, and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. Now, my parents live in Gainey. Needless to say, Fort Dauphin is quite a long flight away from my father's house, which my mother can attest to. You know, it was scary. It was scary to go away knowing that it'd be gone for so long. I knew very little about where I was going and researched even less. And even once I got to Madagascar, I didn't know that I would end up in Fort Dauphin for several weeks. The unknown was part of the challenge, and part of the joy was making that unknown a place that I felt I had real belonging. And then there was COVID. Here are a couple of photos of me on my last few days in Fort Dauphin. I woke up on a Monday. The first email I got said it was time to leave. I cleaned out my house, said goodbye to my friends, people who had become like family, found a home for my cats, got on a rickety Indiana Jones plane that Peace Corps sent to get me and my friends, brought us to the capital. From there, we flew to Ethiopia, stayed in a hotel with a buffet like you wouldn't believe, and then ended up in DC. And then I went from DC to the Catskills, where my brother and sister-in-law have a house, and I basically hid there for a month. It was a pretty severe upheaval. I was prepared to stay for at least 2 years, and I'd planned on staying on longer. And then all of a sudden, the whole world changed. And Madagascar felt so far away from the disease, and then all of a sudden it was there. It was emotional. It was difficult, but in time, friends and family got through it, got a new job here in DC. And, you know, normally in this point, I would say that's the end of the story, but it was not. Even though I had to leave Madagascar unexpectedly, the work I was doing kept going on, and I found a way to contribute. And the work was centered on clean water for students. So this is a good indication of how people around Madagascar fetch water. These are some photos I took for the organization I'm going to talk about. Most water is collected in these cumbersome yellow jerry cans. The effort disproportionately falls on women and children to retrieve water from either wells or utility water. water supplies are really inconsistent both in amount. Where I lived, sometimes I'd go days without running water. Other people don't have running water at all. They get water from local wells. And the purity of the water is a real problem. It often has parasites, other diseases, bacteria. So even if you get enough water to make it through the week, it has to be treated. And if the water is not treated properly, the health consequences can be really dire, even deadly. You imagine a parent missing work when they're already subsisting, or a child missing school, where school might already be inconsistent. One of my favorite collaborative partners while I was in Peace Corps is Tatarani Social Enterprise. Initially, I just took photos for them, and then our partnership got a little more elaborate. Tatarani Social Enterprise is a Malagasy registered company with the goal of clean water for everyone, everywhere, relying just on rainwater and concrete. They do this by building large rain harvesting systems, pictured there. These are large concrete boxes, which are monitored once they're completed, tracked online, and maintained by the organization and community partners, all by taking big roofs and waiting for it to rain, which it will, coming through the gutters into cleaning systems, and then into the tank itself. And that's the kind of simplified engineering of it, but the main point is that these tanks provide clean water for schools, hospitals, and the community at large. Now, across southern Madagascar, thanks to their good work, thousands of people are using these systems every month, and nearly 200,000 gallons of water have been dispersed since September 2019, this organization, and they are adding rain harvesters constantly. Now, before I left, I was in the process of fundraising for a rain harvester at my school. When I got back, I found a way to privately fundraise for it. We were able to complete that tank this past September. It has a capacity of around 5,300 gallons of water, which means 115,000 gallons annually can be collected just through the rain that we think is going to happen anyway. This concrete tank, without much maintenance, has a 50-year lifespan, which means that the tank we built is going to be for students for a generation to have clean water. And just since September, that tank has distributed 53,000 gallons of water. That's to students, to teachers, and the surrounding community. Now, this is one tank that I was talking about, but across southern Madagascar, there are 14 active rain harvesters, 11 of which are running, the remaining are under routine maintenance. Over 7,500 people are accessing these tanks every month. And as you can see, we're verging on 750,000 liters of water distributed, which is that gallon figure I gave earlier. Now, I would say clean water is the most important part, but when you build these tanks and take a community-focused model, it's more than just clean water. Tatarani creates jobs and provides training opportunities for community members. At the tank at my school, we worked with a student club. So they're working with the community and learning a real trade. So we're collaborating with student groups, community leaders, international organizations. When you have a supply of clean water, that becomes a basis for water, sanitation, and hygiene programs. So the lesson, excuse the pun, has a ripple effect. And if all that seems a little complicated, all you need to know is that it's a durable, sustainable, and simple solution to the all-important issue of water access, which certainly all of us who have lived in the desert can appreciate. Another quote that stood out to me as I was putting this together. For the mountains may be moved and the hills may falter, my kindness shall not be removed from you. Now, I am mountains and hills and an equator and an ocean away from Madagascar, but the purpose of my work and the drive to do it has stuck with me. And that's one of the things I'm here to talk about today. thanks to the National Peace Corps Association, which is a nonprofit affiliate that supports Peace Corps' mission, I am able to fundraise for 2 more tanks at 2 schools in southern Madagascar, near the town where I lived. This project that we're doing right now will directly benefit 756 students every single day that they're at school, and over 300 people in the community through water kiosks that tank feeds. Now, there's a quote I think that describes this really well, because we're talking about water, we're talking about students, we're talking about community, but what does that mean? There's a quote from The Little Prince that I think summarizes it. This water was something entirely different from ordinary nourishment. It was born from the walk under the stars, singing of the pulley, and the effort of my arms. It was good for the heart, like a gift. And I've talked a lot about what clean water means. I've used quotes to explain what clean water means, but this is really what it looks like. This is what the project that I'm working on results in. So if you're interested in contributing or learning more about this project, I'm going to provide some links in the chat pod. There's the project and fundraising link itself. There are, on the Tatarani website, live tracking of every single system they have up and running. There's an article that we wrote about the work that Tatarani does in Fort Dauphin. And if you ever have any questions about this project, or maybe you have a niece, nephew, grandchild, son or daughter that wants to go into the Peace Corps, you can reach out to me and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. That's all the time that I've planned for speaking. I'd love to hear from any of you and hear what questions you have.
So Gabriel, we have a couple questions in the chat that I wanted to get to in just a second. I just wanted to make a couple of observations, and maybe this will help to set up our Q&A, and we've got a good chunk of time. We've got a half an hour. First of all, thank you. I know that you had sent me a link a few months ago. I'm grateful for your patience in getting to today and making sure that we have the opportunity to do this presentation. I know you've given this presentation before. I've seen it before, and I know that one of the things that I think is a real testament to you is, because of the conditions under which you left, Madagascar and left the Peace Corps, the emotional component of that, the sadness, the sense of, I was thinking the first time that the first presentation that you emailed me a couple of months ago, I had my year in Israel and rabbinic school interrupted by the first Gulf War in 1991. And my dad, may rest in peace, was literally going to have a coronary if I didn't come home in mid-January as the Scuds were about to be launched into Israel. And so I came home for a little bit, and I remember the anger and the sadness and the survivor's guilt of leaving in the middle of my year. And like I said, that was 1991. You could have gone and hid under a rock in upstate for more than a month. And I think it's a real testament to you that you did the opposite, that your intuition or your ability to feel the sadness and the anger and everything that you felt coming back and then saying, no, I'm going to finish what I started and complete the project. I just think I love your use of all the quotes and texts from Torah, but I think that one of the things that we know, and this came up from the Noah quote, is it's important for each of us to see ourselves as responsible for other human beings, even if these are people that we would never possibly meet or see. I mean, never say never, but the chances of a big chunk of the group here on the call going to Madagascar, period, let alone for 2 years, is small. And the one quote that you didn't use, but is, it's not up to you to complete the task, lo alecha al machal ligmor, but it's also not up to you to walk away from it. I'm just so proud of the fact that you've consistently asserted yourself. And even though you're probably still feeling some sadness and some anger and some ambivalence about coming home, you've done amazing.
I appreciate that.
I wanted to ask you about the government. What is their role in Madagascar with infrastructure projects? And for everyone else to know, I made a donation to this project. I think it's anything to give water to people, drinkable water, anywhere on earth. And because I know Israel is so committed to creating amazing technologies for water, but what's the government's role in infrastructure? How do they match funds? Do they ignore it altogether? Is it corrupted? Is it they're doing the best that they can? How is that? And what was your experience? Did you have any experience interplaying with government or local authorities?
Sure. So quick note, this specific project closes on the 15th. So we have until then to do some more fundraising, and we have a way to bridge whatever gap there may be, but I just wanted to drop that deadline in.
Yeah, and where are you at? Can you close the screen
Yeah.
so that everyone can now see each other?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Where are you at? You have a goal. What's your goal amount?
Our goal is right now $5,750, and we
where are
are
you at?
at 3,460. We have some commitments that'll bridge whatever gap we need to get to, but we're trying to make that gap narrow. As far as dealing with the government, so Madagascar, as I said, has its challenges. There is a lot of corruption and funding, as you'll see in a lot of countries at Madagascar's level of development. And at the local level, you have people dealing with very few resources. Corruption or not, this country has a lot of issues with poverty. There is a legacy of colonialism that left the country in pretty dire straits, the former French colony.
Mm-hmm.
So you have people managing with what they can. There are basic issues of security that are just hard to mitigate. So local organizations like Tatarani really bridge the gap between what services the government can provide and what the reality is of people on the ground. Now, that being said, when we were surveying to build the tank at my school, we met with the school officials, we met with the local water officials, we met with the local community leaders, we publicized the event to the National Water Authority. So this is not an example of, an organization and some know-nothing Peace Corps volunteer going in and, seeing what they can do to change the world. This was very thoughtful, very collaborative, and that's really the way to make these changes sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. Someone wants you to say a line or two in the dialect that you learned.
Yeah, let me see. So
it's been a few months.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to think of, so my students and we would joke around in Malagasy a lot, especially when I got comfortable with them. And the fun thing about Malagasy is that it kind of sounds like what you're saying. So I would tell my students, kami menu menuna, which would mean stop complaining. Or, mahagaga, that means to laugh. I would always ask I had a light outside my house where I lived that was broken for several weeks. And I always asked the paramedic, like, Efamisulu Nijiru, like, have you already replaced the light? And he'd be like, no. So, yeah, it's a very musical language. The way people in my dialect speak, very sharp, very fast. Sometimes it felt like shouting. But yeah. I found myself well suited to
Sounds
that.
like Israel a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. A lot of expression.
Susie wanted to know, how did you get clean water for yourself where you were?
So Peace Corps provided us with these, water filters, these portable water filters. And sometimes I would get water from my indoor sink, which didn't always run. So there was also a tap outside the school where I could get water. I also had those big yellow jerry cans, and I had a couple in storage. So for those several days when I didn't have any running water, I had reserve. So it was really just a matter of purifying water that I got from the school. When you go into Peace Corps, admittedly, like the the requirements a community has are pretty slim. Access to water is critical if you're going to host a Peace Corps volunteer. Yeah. And, again, but the water had to be purified first, always.
And so that sort of related to that, and this is just preface this by saying this is a very Joe Luber question. For those of you who know, Joe is sort of the director of all things maintenance at CBI, just because he notices everything. But he asked he said, it appears that this water project is new. What was done prior, or what maybe even, and that goes back to the infrastructure. What other kinds of projects were done before that you may have learned from and replicated, or was this just brand spanking new?
So in Fort Dauphin, there is a water utility. It is very unreliable and the purity is very bad, but they have essentially community spigots, and some lucky people have indoor water. Tatarani was started by a British NGO worker and his Malagasy co-worker. They started together. Where I lived has very predictable and substantial rain. So they had been doing rain harvesting projects before Tatarani launched last year and decided they wanted to completely focus on that. Because the water supplies are so predictable, because rainwater is going to be cleaner than what they got from the utility, it seemed very intuitive. The reason the project at my school was so exciting is because where I lived had the biggest roof in town. So it had huge rain harvesting potential. Additionally, the school served as a community gather place. So with this rain harvester, you could set a really good example for a lot of people. These 2 rain harvesters that we're fundraising for now will also be at 2 other schools, and these schools do serve as community place. So it's about setting an example and putting the rain harvesters in useful locations. Everybody who has a house has a roof, and so really anybody could benefit from a rain harvester of varying sizes.
That's amazing. And I'm going to put some links down here that I think will be useful for those who are going to be, and can you check that one, Gabriel, to see if that's that's the Zoom link. I'm sorry.
Here, I'm going to put a link directly.
Will you do that? Yeah,
yes.
I put the wrong link in there. Back to the questions. I'll give you a second to cut and paste while you're doing that. There was a question about, this is a very appropriate question from Gail Bear, given the text that you used, and I know that we had talked about your desire to sort of follow the portions and read text while you were there, which I think is a really great idea for all of us when we travel or when we're home. How have you changed personally with your Jewish life now that you're back in the US? Do you look at any aspect of our tradition or Jewish values differently?
Yeah, I think.
I'm sorry that Gail had to leave a couple minutes early, but that was her question.
No, so I think it's no secret that when you have access to something, you might take it for granted. And living in the United States, especially living in Arizona with my parents loving CBI so much, I kind of took for granted that when I wanted, there was a Jewish community that I could go to. Moving to Madagascar, I realized that I wouldn't have that, and that it presented an opportunity to either just, do nothing, or, explore Judaism on my own initiative. And that's what I did. And, now that I'm here and back, still sorting things out with COVID, I've realized that as a community, it's something I want in my life. So certainly, I don't want to cliche, but the absence made the spirit grow fonder.
And it's interesting. We have a couple of former CBIs, working in DC, a couple working for Schweikert in cinema, your age, and they've told me that it's a pretty good Jewish scene there. I mean, whether it's I want to study with a group of people, or I want to have a private, not a private, but maybe a service at someone's house, we call the independent movement, where you basically do camp style services, but really they're dinners and opportunities for cocktails. But it sounds like DC is a great place to be a young Jew. One of the things I think also is that, you know, and as you come back and we're able to be in public again, I would love for you to come and do an abbreviated version of this presentation, because I think that I want the religious school kids to hear, you know, there's the AmeriCorps project also, which was founded during the Clinton administration. This was founded, Peace Corps, during the Kennedy administration, or maybe right after he was assassinated.
Sergeant Shriver, first director.
Right. Someone asked about drought cycles. The topography, going back to that first image, if you want to, can you just sort of explain the different topography and ecosystem, if you will, of Madagascar? Because I think you had mentioned that there's like so many different little, you know, pockets where you can have a drought in one area, but tremendous.
Some scientists would argue that Madagascar is, as a nation, the most unique place on the planet.
Because of the different topography and everything.
Yeah, you know, you have very intense rainforest. Just south of me, you have a part of the country that looks what I imagine Mars to look like in terms of its dryness and the harsh climate. Where I lived was very coastal tropical. And just south of me, there was a park that is known for having 3 ecosystems, microclimates within it.
Wow.
So the variance across the country, it's about 1.5 times the size of California, you essentially can explore any kind of climate, which is why this project is so useful where I live, because the rain is so predictable. There's mountains that, you know, I can't explain the atmospherics of it, but mountains create a kind of, you know, predictable rain system. And there is a hot season, which is why the capacity of these tanks is so important. Right. Additionally, the way that they're designed, the darkness within it, the tracking, it helps keep the water pure. So even if you have to go a long time without rain and you're drawing on, you know, the same water supply for a long time, the quality is still very good. It's very impressive engineering. In those drier parts of the country, Tatarani is trying to figure out, you know, how can we, you know, get more water, even if you're, you know, fog capture, like literally pulling water out of morning fog, capturing water off road runoff. There's all kinds of innovation happening on the ground there. And it is all very local.
I know Israel is in partnership currently with India on that system of getting water from humid air. And converting it into drinking water. Susie, did you have a comment? I couldn't tell if you were raising your hand or not. No? Okay. Let's open it up for some other questions.
I see a question in the chat pod about keeping a diary.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I did journal almost every single day that I was in Peace Corps. And one of the shocking things is how kind of banal my journal entries became, because what was so extreme initially, walking through the market, you know, haggling with vendors, you know, seeing the things I saw, is that it became my routine. And you really discover that your comfort zone, those boundaries aren't necessarily boundaries. I did keep a blog while I was there, which I'm happy to share out, that kind of documented different experiences I had, including when I helped my cat give birth to her kittens. Something that I'm not trained to do. But yeah, there was some really just stunning and odd experiences that became day to day for me.
I do have a question.
Yes, Susie.
Okay. As somebody who loves to travel and has been to third world countries where you always have to carry your own water. And I'm wondering, did you experience problems, any medical issues or any problems with food? And when you did, what were the problems with the medical situation?
Yeah. So for one, yes. You know, I will say, like, the tourist experience of Peace Corps, or the tourist experience of Madagascar, can be much more protected than the Peace Corps experience. You know, our quality of life is just by design not as clean. Which is why the medical training you get is really important in those first 3 months. We also get your own medical kit. Now, I will say we had doctors on call 24/7, but really on call was the extent of it. Like they could tell you what to do, but it was kind of up to you to do it yourself. In the event of a serious emergency, they will lift heaven and earth to get you somewhere safe. The most severe illness I experienced was dysentery, which, as I understand it, killed a lot of people on the Oregon Trail. Hard to imagine me in 2019, 2020 experiencing that. But, you know, I took my antibiotics, I took my rehydrating salts, and lots of friends of mine brought me food while I was sick. And, you know, funny enough, like I was as sick as I've ever been for 3 days. On the fourth day, I went and played Frisbee on the beach. So my experience with sickness in Peace Corps is that you get resilient to it and you get better at treating it, and it stops defining your week. You know, we had preventative malaria medication. Madagascar still experiences, you know, bubonic plague. These are just seasonal things there. So you just roll with it. And you have your supply of medicine that is on you to be responsible for. The training is really important.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah.
Joe Luber.
For the medical care, were they U.S. doctors, that is Peace Corps doctors, or were they practitioners in Madagascar? And if so, where did they get their training? Do you know that?
Yeah, so the Peace Corps medical team in Madagascar was, I believe, 2 or 3 Malagasy doctors and 1 American doctor, all of whom were incredibly competent. Many of them had trained in Madagascar and in other countries. Peace Corps can provide training. Our most severe doctor, Dr. A, he got his training under the Soviet combat medic, which he referenced. They could attend to our needs with such care, efficiency, and empathy. It was incredible. In a real like life crisis emergency, you would be evacuated to South Africa, where there's a hub for, you know, that kind of global region of Peace Corps volunteers. And then in really important situations, they'll get you back to the United States. The resources for medical care are tremendous. When I had dysentery, the doctors called me 3 times a day to check in and tell me that they were with me.
And how many times a day did your mom call?
You know, they were actually, you know, I think I got a lot of messages. They knew I'd call when I could. It's, you know, the data and phone signal is.
I meant how many times did your mom have your dad call?
We were in good contact.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. Jill and Alan, tell me a little bit about your experience as parents of a kid who went to Madagascar for almost 2 years. And I know you like him and you're a big fan, but what was your experience when you were there? And I know I can't imagine the anxiety, but nonetheless, I mean, what a menschy kid. But from your perspective, what was it like?
Well, there's a whole bunch of mixed emotions. Certainly there's concern, fear, there's a lot of pride. We had a lot of faith in the Peace Corps and a lot of documentation that should anything very serious happen, the Peace Corps takes care of their kids. And I believe ultimately one of the main reasons they had to shut down was losing that ability to evacuate someone for medical reasons. Mm-hmm. I did not go to Madagascar. Jill and I met Gabriel in South Africa when he took a vacation. Jill was the one who made the trip by herself the first 2 weeks in March. So think of what was going on then. And I think she can attest to how difficult life is there.
It's challenging. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. I went with a very open mind.
At that point, we thought he was going to stay an extra year.
Right.
So we knew we might not be seeing him for a very long time. So she went in March. I was going to go a few months later.
Mom, what would you say about my friends who you met, all the Malagasy people I introduced you to?
Wonderful. It's a wonderful community. It's amazing how resourceful they are with so little. We're so spoiled here. They're happy. They loved Gabriel, and he had wonderful friends. And I was very happy for him. but I'm happy he's home now.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely. Well, thanks. I, again, didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I did want to get some, feedback from you as well.
When they did the evacuation and they took them from the little plane from down there up to the Capitol, then they took all 100 and something volunteers and put them on another State Department plane to Ethiopia. You never thought you'd be saying, God, thank God my kid made it to Ethiopia.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. Gabriel, do you still feel some survivor's guilt, some anger, some angst? Or has this project really helped you? And as we wrap up, I want you to also, talk about that and sort of emphasize in the next 48 hours, the funding period will close for this, but will you be able to roll it over into another funding period, or how does that work?
Yeah, so, it became important to me that the feeling of incompleteness did not become inaction.
Mm-hmm.
I was so devastated to leave. I loved my life there. I love my friends there, and I miss them, and I'm still in touch with them. That being said, I found a way to stay involved, and that doesn't make me any more or less resourceful than those who have come home and moved forward their lives, because it's very difficult. And if you think about it, the idea of coming home from Peace Corps, you imagine seeing your friends, seeing your family. I've barely been able to do any of that because of COVID. So yeah. I think empathy is, anytime I feel angry or sad, I try to supplement it with a little bit of empathy that we're all going through extraordinary times and we're all finding innovative ways to stay connected. And this project has been one of my ways to do that. And when we fund and build these 2 rain harvesters, I will have helped this wonderful organization build 3, which means thousands of kids get clean water. So
it also kind of shows you how far $5,000 can go.
Yeah, it's the investment's good, considering these.
You said tanks, it's got a 50-year lifespan, and then that doesn't include potential technologies that come up that make it last even longer. You're literally changing lives.
This is not a Band-Aid. This is a real solution that has tremendous benefits, both amazing in terms of clean water and access overall. On the 15th, we do close fundraising for these 2 rain harvesters. Mm-hmm. National Peace Corps Association and I will bridge the fundraising gaps that we need to. But we've been really excited to include people and raise awareness. And I think especially amidst the challenges of the election and some of the other social issues that have come up this year, which are so important, this is a good example of people of very different backgrounds coming together and supporting something good. For some people, it's just a distraction. For other people, it's an example, but I just see it as good work helping some people I care about a lot.
And, I don't want anyone to think that we planned this to be a solicitation. This really is a presentation about this amazing guy, Gabriel, and what he did, during the time and since he got back. And I said I made a donation because I just believe that, everybody is entitled to water. And I believe that it's very important for us as a congregation to get behind projects that our younger members are engaged in. So Gabriel, when you get to the 11th hour, give me an email and let us know what the tally is, or let me know. And I actually just received a very generous donation to my discretionary fund. So maybe I'll be able to give a little more.
And I just want to say,
which is God's way of saying, by the way, literally yesterday, to me, kick in a few more shekels. But the idea that this 5,000, what did you say, $5,400?
It's 5,780, I believe.
It's an amazing thing. In the United States, to build something like this would be $5 million because you'd have to pay, $5,000 for the hammer and $5,000 for the wrench.
And let me just say, this project aside, I think, especially in these times, the Jewish tradition of community and generosity is more important than ever.
Yeah.
So whether it's this or another organization, or just even checking in on those we love, surely these times, as an example of many things that can go wrong, are also showing us new ways to connect with each other. 2 years ago, who knows if, this lunch would have been happening with all of us. So amidst the challenges, these are the opportunity to show love and care for each other. And I think that's what's excited me about this the most.
We have time for about 1 or 2 more questions, depending on how long the answers are.
I can be concise.
Well, let me,
I think I see.
oh, Marty Schultz. See,
Okay.
Marty Schultz is our local and state infrastructure guru.
How can I help you, Marty?
Go ahead, Marty.
I didn't hear him because he froze, but I got an idea what he said. And that's what I was really going to ask. What about implications with your learning for the kinds of things we can do here in our community and our state? Because we have conditions that are significantly close to what you're talking about. People don't realize that because we've figured out a way to build a community and keep poverty and difficulty separate.
Yeah, so
Help us with your thoughts.
So I think
Great question, Marty.
Yeah, and I'll say this for like specific solutions. Let's just talk about like water for a second, and then I'll broaden it out. A rain harvester technology is not complicated. There are all kinds of common source ways that you can build a rain harvester, and that's useful. If my parents wanted a rain harvester next to the cacti out front, building it would not be complicated, nor would keeping the water clean. But more broadly, as far as social causes, development, helping people, you as an agent can go in and elevate existing community leaders and learn together. And that's important. And also the solutions do not have to be nationally heroic. These really small critical improvements will go a long way. If that's giving someone clean water so that they are sick less often, that is a way to reduce medical costs. If you're worried about education, we are training students to manage and promote and even build these rain harvesters. That's a trade. So you don't have to solve everything. Just do one thing really well and then find what the kind of broader impact can be. And again, the ripple effect of these rain harvesters is educational, economic, medical, all with a bunch of concrete and chicken wire. It's pretty cool.
Over a long period of time.
Over decades.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Gabriel, I want to thank you very much. First of all, this was our first conversations with Rabbi Kahn, and I think it went lovely. And I really mean, when we get back in person and you come back, I do want you to speak to our religious school kids, because I think the idea of serving what we're learning, I think, is it's the old Jewish, universalism versus particularism. And they don't have to be versus. They don't have to be exclusive. They can be inclusive. We are a particular people. We have a particular system and belief, but we have universal values. And the bridging of these in such a meaningful way, it's not for everyone, obviously. As your mom even said, it's not for the faint of heart to travel. Or as Susie was talking about I know she's done extensive traveling, and many people here have. Carol and Ken Zyberg have been all over the world. But, to take that idea from Noah that everyone is speaking each other's language, that wasn't a good concept. God had to break that up and make it lots of languages so that we could figure out how to put all the pieces back together. It's a challenge of being a person, and you did it, and you're continuing to do it. And I'm really just so proud of you and proud of proud for your parents. Can you put everyone, I'm going to keep the chat open for a few more minutes. You can go back, and there's a hyperlink that Gabriel put for the donation. If you click on that from the chat box, it will open up a new window so that when we end this meeting, that window will still be there. If,
let me just
for whatever
say,
reason you can't do that, email me and I will give you the link.
Yeah, and I so appreciate any support, and even if you're unable to support right now, the time that you've given me. I appreciate greatly. And
Mm.
whatever successes I've had, whatever work I've done that, you know, people here are proud of me of, I couldn't have done it without everybody's support along the way. So thank you. And thank you for today.
Thank you so much, my friend. And we'll look forward to hearing more from Gabriel when he comes back home and we're all able to be together. For the next 2 weeks, Lunch and Learn conversations, I have one pending invitation, which is based on the other invitation. So I have invited, just waiting for confirmation from my colleague and dear friend, Rabbi Aaron Bisno, who's the senior rabbi of Road of Shalom Synagogue, Congregation Road of Shalom in Pittsburgh. We were going to have a conversation about post Tree of Life massacre and what has happened in the Pittsburgh Jewish community. Aaron played a very significant role, as did Road of Shalom, in the days and weeks following. They were the temporary home of Tree of Life. Mrs. Rogers, the wife of the famous Mr. Rogers, spoke on his pulpit the Friday after the event. And they're now, as you know, speaking about universalism. Typically, Jewish people give to Jewish causes. So many non-Jews, and especially celebrities, have given to the cause of what they're doing to memorialize those from that tragic event a couple of years ago. So I'm waiting for him. I don't know if that'll be next Tuesday or in 2 weeks. And I have one other invitation, but this should all be to you by, hopefully at the latest Thursday. You'll have the next 2 weeks of conversations for Lunch and Learn. And then hopefully, again, we'll hear from Gabriel when he comes back home and he'll speak to our religious school kids. This will be on YouTube again sometime this afternoon. And Gabriel, thank you. And thank everyone so much for your participation. And I'll see you very soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
And thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Bye, guys.